When we broke down the D23 Episode 9 The Rise of Skywalker footage a few days ago, I mentioned that the most interesting shot was the massive fleet of Imperial-class Star Destroyers, which appeared to be endless and filling the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Today, we're going to look at this shot more in depth, and I'm going to provide my theories to explain first why this is Palpatine's Star Destroyer fleet and how it survived for decades after the fall of the Empire, and then where these capital ships might be located in a video to be released tomorrow. Enough evidence exists within the current canon to strongly suggest that the Star Destroyer seen within the D23 footage weren't just holdovers from the era of the Galactic Empire, but preemptively positioned by Palpatine to be utilized later during his eventual return. In short, this is Palpatine's Star Destroyer fleet. The first key is to distance these Star Destroyers from the First Order, which isn't a difficult task given their distinct connection to the Imperial-era capital ships. The fact that these are Imperial-class Star Destroyers is important, and I don't think it's a coincidence they're different than the capital ships of the First Order. The First Order relied on a completely separate class of Star Destroyer known as the Resurgent class, which was in addition to the Mandator IV class Siege Dreadnought and the Mega-class Star Dreadnought. These capital ships were all produced by corporations that were subsidiaries of the giant corporations that produced the Imperial fleet, such as Kuat and Tralla Engineering, which manufactured the three previously mentioned capital ships. It's this reason why the First Order Star Destroyers appear to be so similar to the Empire's. But make no mistake, their Star Destroyers were completely different than those of the Imperial era, built for the needs and resources available to the First Order. It just isn't likely that these companies, whether it be Kuat and Tralla or Seiner Jamis, or even the First Order itself, would suddenly revert back to the Imperial-class Star Destroyers. More important, I believe the true origins of this Star Destroyer fleet is connected to Palpatine's long-term plan known as the Contingency. I explained the full nature of Palpatine's contingency plan earlier this year in a video called How Palpatine Survived and Will Return in Episode 9 The Rise of Skywalker. But as a brief recap, the contingency was an initiative undertaken by Palpatine decades in the making, which would ensure the existence of his empire should it fail him in its most important task, that being the protection of Palpatine himself. If the Empire ever failed Palpatine, if it ever proved unworthy of the Dark Lord, the contingency plan would be executed to ensure the rebirth of a stronger empire. This plan required Palpatine to find a way to navigate through the unknown regions, as Palpatine's new empire needed a staging ground where it could rise unencumbered by the rebellion and its resulting new republic. Paramount to Palpatine's plan in this regard was the observatory on the planet of Jakku, a planet which had the benefit of being relatively close to the unknown regions. The observatory would focus solely on this unknown section of space. Ancient computers and computational mechanisms, which also benefited from the knowledge of Thrawn, would slowly and painfully plot a course through the dangerous black holes, solar storms, and gravity wells that made travel so difficult. This was the key to Palpatine's true endgame. If he was ever defeated, a new empire would be created here within the unexplored infinity. Palpatine would eventually plot his course through the unknown regions, but importantly, we know from the recollections of Snoke in the Episode 8 novelization that as Imperial scouts progressed through the unknown regions, Palpatine established numerous shipyards, storehouses, and laboratories along the way. This might lead us to conclude that it was these shipyards and other resources established by Palpatine that might account for the origins of the Imperial-class Star Destroyers recently seen in the D23 footage. Established during the era of the Empire, perhaps these shipyards were merely outfitted with schematics utilized by the Galactic Empire, and these Imperial Star Destroyers were built side by side with the other capital ships produced for the First Order. Again, I don't think so. Imperial-class Star Destroyers did not meet the needs of the First Order. Given their limited resources relative to the Galactic Empire, the bigger is better model was accepted, which is why the First Order's Resurgent-class Star Destroyers are almost twice the size of the Imperial class. Not to mention, the Resurgent class represents a vast increase in technology, improving on the design flaws inherent in the Imperial model, and a change in tactics. Because the First Order wanted capital ships that utilized the role of a carrier, the Resurgent class shared many similarities to the Republic's Venators, rather than the Imperial-era vessels, built with unique flight decks, side hangars, and launch mechanisms that allowed it to better utilize its starfighters. All of this is to say that the First Order's designs were carefully crafted, with the Resurgent class becoming the face of the First Order Navy, to the point where it easily replaced the aging Imperial class from its service, a fact made clear in both the Force Awakens Incredible Cross-Sections Guide and the Before the Awakening novel. I believe we can confidently say this massive fleet of Star Destroyers in The Rise of Skywalker wasn't built by subsidiaries of known corporations, such as Kuat and Tralla, or by any of the secret shipyards that supplied the First Order's military resources from within the unknown regions through the contingency. These Star Destroyers are connected to Palpatine, and to understand how, we need to go back to the contingency and what exactly Palpatine knew before his apparent death in the Battle of Endor. The contingency wasn't merely a plan in theory for Palpatine, its great success only in ensuring the rise of the First Order. It was actually executed by the Dark Lord shortly before the Battle of Endor. At this time, Palpatine knew he was quickly approaching a shatterpoint that threatened his vision for the galaxy and would plunge it into chaos. The catalyst for this recognition was the knowledge that Luke Skywalker landed on the forest moon of Endor, and with him, a destiny that challenged Palpatine's. This was no small moment, and Palpatine knew he was at a critical point in his path as a Sith, maybe even the most important. As Palpatine explained to his protege Gallius Rax, the man he put in charge of the contingency, they were coming to a moment of grave uncertainty, a moment towards which all things flowed. Even more important, Palpatine had no idea how events would turn out. He knew only one thing, that Vader had failed him, and it was necessary to turn his son Luke to the dark side to replace him. Therefore, with so much uncertainty, Palpatine had no choice but to execute the contingency. In doing so, he would ensure a new, more powerful empire would rise should he fail to successfully confront Luke's destiny. By executing the contingency, we know that this would eventually lead to Operation Cinder, followed by the Battle of Jakku, and ultimately, the retreat of the Imperial remnant into the unknown regions, where it would rise to become the First Order. But I also believe that Palpatine's foresight regarding the approaching chaos and potential for the failure of his empire prompted him to send a massive armada of Imperial-class Star Destroyers into the unknown regions. Should he fail with Luke, which of course he did, hundreds, maybe even thousands of Star Destroyers would be taken out of the hands of the Empire that failed in its only task of protecting him. But I believe this was done more for his benefit than simply a desire to help with what would become the First Order. Palpatine always planned his return, which we'll look at more in our second video tomorrow, and in preparation for this return, he moved a massive fleet into the unknown regions through the route that was unlocked by the Jakku Observatory at some point before Episode 6. These aren't capital ships built for the First Order or by them in secret shipyards. In the closing moments of the Battle of Jakku, Brendol Hux, the father of Armitage Hux, spoke with Gallius Rax, Palpatine's protege and fellow architect of the contingency. As explained by Rax, Brendol was to get on board a starship that was a replica of Palpatine's private yacht, the Imperialis, and which had been equipped with a droid pilot with predetermined path coordinates to navigate the chaos and dangers of the unknown regions. Rax was adamant, roughly 1 year after Endor, the Empire had ended, but a new one was ready to begin. Brendol was dumbfounded, asking how it was possible a new empire could rise when they didn't have the numbers to begin anew. The answer didn't come from Rax, but from Palpatine's close friend and advisor Yup Tashu, who was also a chief architect of the contingency with Palpatine, who assured Brendol that, quote, "there are others." Without question, Tashu was referring to the other Imperial loyalists who were rendezvousing with the Eclipse, Palpatine's own personal Super Star Destroyer within the unknown regions. But the giddiness of Palpatine's friend in this scene and the timing of his answer makes it appear as though Tashu knew more. There were others, waiting in the unknown regions, ready to build a new empire in the form of the First Order. But there was also the armada of Star Destroyers sent by Palpatine himself, waiting for his coming return. So there we have it, why the Star Destroyer fleet seen in the D23 footage originated with Palpatine and will be used by him in Episode 9. Tomorrow, we'll look at where these Star Destroyers might be located, further connecting them to the Dark Lord of the Sith. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. Or perhaps follow us on Twitter at SW Reading Club for updates regarding the channel. Or support the channel through Patreon for access to exclusive rewards and discussions. If not for me, for second chances.